Hi, and welcome back to TESOL with Micky and Ide. I'm Micky. This is our second episode on our series on Lev Vygotsky. So last time we introduced sociocultural theory, and this is one of Vygotsky's concepts that learning does not just take place inside the learner, but it's actually external. So it's through other people, so society, and it's also within a culture. When we talked about that last time, we talked about cultural tools, and today we are going to explore the most powerful cultural tool, which is language. So stay tuned to find out more. For Vygotsky, language wasn't just about communicating. He saw it as something that actually helped learners to shape their thinking. So from this perspective, when learners use language, it's not just to express themselves or to express their thinking. Actually, it's a way of developing their thinking as well. So the crucial thing we need to consider here is that language and thought, according to Vygotsky, are kind of locked in a matrix where one develops the other. So if we just take this principle and then think about our own teaching practice, it gives us an opportunity to think about when our students discuss something, when they write something, or when they even sit silently and think about something, we are helping them to develop. Something really important to know is that Vygotsky suggested that learning was dialogic. So what is a dialogue? A dialogue is something which happens between two or more people. Vygotsky thought that dialogue and learning happened in two ways. The first way was external. So this is through dialogue with, for instance, if we think of the TESOL classroom, could be the teacher and the learner. It could be learners between themselves, like peers, or it could be the learner and AI. Vygotsky also thought that learning was internal. So there was an internal dialogue. And this is kind of interesting because it suggests that you are having a conversation with yourself, but that's actually like two different speakers. And he thought that this was private or silent conversations that we have with ourselves when we're trying to work things out. This can be a reminder for us that both external interaction and internal reflections, where we think to ourselves, may contribute to learning. Let's go a little bit deeper into the idea of internal dialogue by unpacking one of Vygotsky's most important concepts, which is private speech. So, Vygotsky is well known for observing that children often talk to themselves. And this is when they're maybe playing or they're doing some kind of task. So he called this private speech. And he thought that over time, this private speech became internalized. And this supports the idea of this sociocultural theory where you learn as part of an external society and culture, but internalize that. So as a child, you talk to yourself for a while and then internalize it, and that becomes thought. That becomes like self-regulation, or it becomes something like reasoning. Think about being an adult as well. Are there times where you speak to yourself? Like I speak to myself sometimes, and it can be if I'm stressed, or maybe you're scared, or maybe something's really difficult and you're trying to work it out. So that internal voice or dialogue gets externalized, where you talk to yourself to try and understand something. And in second language learning, it's also common. So in the TESOL classroom, we can hear it where our students speak out loud to themselves to try and solve problems or to try and develop their own learning. So even if we try to apply these basic concepts to our classroom, have you ever noticed this with your learners? Or have you provided time for them to think aloud, for them to have that reflection where they can use their private speech to help them develop? You might want to reflect on the time that you've noticed this in the classroom with your learners, or perhaps you can provide them with some time where they can do this kind of thing. Of course, not all cultures emphasize dialogue in the same way. Vygotsky was a Russian speaker, and his ideas became popularized by Western scholars. In some communities and in some cultures, learning may rely more on observation, on demonstration, or a gradual participation rather than explicit talk. So it's really helpful and necessary part of critical thinking for you to think about how can some of these ideas be applied or not. Does learning in my context happen through verbal interaction, or is it through some other kind of participation? Finally, I might think about how these ideas might shape the way that I design learning activities. So in the last episode, we talked about how Vygotsky saw mental function as lower and higher. The lower ones were the functions that we share with animals, and the higher ones are where those lower functions interact with society and culture, are developed and organized and reorganized as our thinking develops. What I want to mention here is that Vygotsky also described three main ways that higher mental functions can develop as part of learning. The first one was imitative learning. So this is where a learner copies a model. So it could be something like choral repetition that we do in the TESOL classroom. The second one was instructed learning, and this is where the teacher gives instructions to learners and they become internalized. So we're going back to the idea of something which is external becomes internal. Finally was collaborative learning. So this is where peers work together and build shared understandings. And here's an opportunity for you to apply theory to practice. So think about it. Out of imitative, instructed, and collaborative learning, which of these are you applying in your classroom at the moment? Is it one more than others? Is it one and not the other two? And then think about why you are doing that. Is that appropriate? Can you change it? Let's think about why language is such an important cultural tool. When we engage students in dialogue either between the teacher and the learner, or we give the students an activity to do where they have to speak and use language, or when we give them time for private reflection and where that internal dialogue can happen, we are ultimately finding ways of mediating thought through language. So this gives us the opportunity to look at the classroom in a different way. The classroom and speaking in the classroom is not just about practice for communication, it's also a way to help our learners take part in something where their thinking will develop. Okay, to sum up, language is not just for communication, but is also for thinking and developing thought. Dialogue, both external and internal, can play a really central role in learning. However, we have to think really carefully about the culture and the context that we are teaching in. In the next episode, we're going to talk about the zone of proximal development. If you like this episode, then please give it a thumbs up. And if you think that this episode could help or benefit somebody else, please share it with them. What are your thoughts about some of the stuff that we've talked about today, about language being a tool for learning and developing thought? What is your experience of that in teaching and learning? I'd love to hear about that, so leave something in the comments. I'll see you next time.